Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kim Schmidt, Executive Editor of Farm Equipment Magazine. Welcome to our latest webinar, Sustainability as an Opportunity, in conjunction with Pinion. Today's presenters are Mark Johnson and Lisa Becker. Mark proactively counsels business owners on financial and tax matters in order to position them well for growth and business succession. He works primarily with equipment dealerships throughout the U.S. and has over 20 years of experience doing that. He's going to share a little bit about Lisa once we hand things over to them, so we'll have her introduction shortly. Before they get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. On your screen, there's a control panel with a Q&A icon. You can submit questions here at any time during the presentation, and then we will try to answer as many questions as possible once they finish the presentation. And then a reminder, as always, we're recording the webinar in case anyone wants to go back and rewatch it or share it with anyone else at the dealership. All right, with that, we are ready to get started. Thank you again for joining us, and take it away, Mark and Lisa.
Thanks, Kim. I feel like I have two introductions to make, and the first one is who the heck is Pinion, because many of the people on this webinar would know my face as being associated with KCoe Isom, which was our firm for the last 6 or 7 years, and prior to that we were Kennedy & Co. So we just went through a name change. Same people own the firm, same people work for the firm. We still serve the same kind of clients. We just marketing decided it was time to change our name to match the same name that we do business as globally. So now we are known as Pinion, but you might also still see our name KCoe Isom out there on some financial statements and things like that as we deliver multiple services to our clients. Lisa is the other person I need to introduce today. So Lisa Becker, she's a manager with Pinion in our firm's sustainability division. And so unlike me, where I serve equipment dealers, Lisa is actually serving growers, processors, food companies, and ag industry associations nationwide. So she has credentials as a CPA, but she also is certified in the Global Reporting Initiative's Sustainability Reporting Framework. That's a mouthful. So basically, in the accounting world, we have generally accepted accounting principles, and the principles that are going to certify sustainability, they're still in the works, and one of them is this Global Reporting Initiative. And so she understands that framework and is using that to bring value to clients seeking sustainability services within our firm. And she's housed out of our Sacramento, California office, and so I figure where better to understand where these issues are taking us than someone from our California offices. So that is Lisa. So Lisa, thanks for joining us today and helping me get through a topic that I don't know all that much about either. So
well, thank you for having me.
Yes. So actually, again, Pinion is, like I said, the same firm that you guys knew as KCoe Isom. We're just a little bit bigger than we used to be. We've been merging some firms into ours and trying to find even more niches to serve, particularly the food and ag industry and all of its offshoots throughout the country. As you know, we do financial services, we do all the accounting stuff, but we also do all kinds of expertise across the ag supply chains, and one of those is sustainability, and that's why we thought this would be an important one to bring to you guys today. When I think of sustainability for equipment dealers, I've always thought more in terms of understanding financial health, your ratios and your forecasting and your estate planning, tax planning, all that kind of stuff, and the things that it takes to sustain your business and investment. And all the resources that your family's put into it. So that's kind of sustainability. It is sustainability for everything. Lisa's take on it is a little different on that. Hers is from the actual the ecosystem parts of that. But we're not going to talk about global warming or any of that kind of stuff today that you guys might associate with the word sustainability. So I don't want you to tune out when you hear that that's what we're talking about, because the truth is there is sustainability is all over the place with that, and it's an emerging market that you guys are going to need to understand and figure out where that's taking you. So one takeaway from this would be that this is where the food system is going in the US. It's not political, it's not about controversies, etc., and you just need to understand where we're going and how it's going to impact your customer base. So with that, we're going to look at as kind of an overview, what to watch and what you can do now to position your business better to kind of react to this changing world. And that's why Lisa's here. So Lisa, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a lot of content to share with you. I will say this is probably a drop in the bucket of what we would consider sustainability, since we know that word can be pretty loaded and has a lot of different considerations. What we're going to focus on is some of the most key impacts we're seeing within the market and really more broadly within the food and ag supply chains that may impact or are impacting dealerships, and how you all can really best support your customers as it relates to sustainability. So first, starting with an overview of what we're seeing in the market. You all may have heard of science-based targets, and those are greenhouse gas emission reduction targets that are being set by a lot of large players within the food and ag supply chains. Science-based targets are typically including not only just a direct operations impacts, but really the impacts across their supply chain. So when we see the numbers up here of 3,700 or so companies taking action, that has a significant impact across the supply chain when we're looking at large players like Walmart as a significant retailer, Nestle as a significantly large food company, our quick serve markets, our protein companies, as well as producer organizations. All of the companies here have either set a science-based target or in the process of setting a science-based target. And we see in the graph on the far right that there's an exponential increase in these types of targets being set. The key thing to note here is because these targets include emissions reductions throughout the supply chain, a lot of these companies are looking at what their supply chain impacts are and trying to identify opportunities to increase those greenhouse gas reductions within their supply chain. So I can nerd out on greenhouse gas accounting for a while, but I will spare you all. The one thing I did want to show you is this scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 chart. The main takeaways here are that scope 1 and 2 are more focused on direct operations. But if we look in those two purple arrows, the upstream and downstream activities included there all are part of that greenhouse gas ecosystem that the Nestle's, the Walmarts, the McDonald's, all those big players are really focusing on. Often for a food company, for example, their direct emissions are a drop in the bucket compared to their supply chain emissions. And that first category there that we have a box around, purchased goods and services, that's often the most significant bucket of greenhouse gas emissions. For a food company, it can be anywhere from, say, 75 to 95% of their overarching emissions. So when Walmart and Nestle and these other organizations are thinking about what they want to invest in terms of driving reductions, they're looking at their purchased goods and services. And within that, as a food company, of course, we know the significant purchases are going to be coming out of the ag supply chains. So that just goes to show, given that these targets are being set and the components that we see as far as the biggest bang for your buck or the most significant area for greenhouse gas accounting, that's why there's so much focus that we're seeing within the ag industry. So the opportunity for you all is really helping to support your customers as they continue to see more interest, get more questions around what they're doing to either drive reductions or increase soil carbon storage at the farm level. This is kind of a funny diagram, but we do think it does a good job of really showing the various greenhouse gas emissions and reduction sources that exist at the farm level. So a lot of the conversation and a lot of the investments that we're seeing within the supply chain is really focused on these various systems and how those companies can support growers in really achieving the targets that are being set by their downstream customers. Oh, Mark, it looks like you are muted.
Dang, what a rookie move that I forgot to unmute. So, I was thinking that those last few slides you went through is what's important for them to know on those is we're not necessarily the one, the equipment dealer isn't the one that people are going to come after as far as understanding that, but we are going to feed someone else's greenhouse gas footprint. So some point we need to know, the scope 1 part, at least for us, of where our energy is coming from and that kind of thing. So at least for these guys, that part wasn't as concerning as it is for the rest of them upstream and downstream from him. So what else do these guys need to watch for as far as what's coming next?
Yeah, so a couple areas that we're seeing of significant focus from these supply chain partners are regenerative ag, increasing adoption of emerging technology, as well as participation in carbon markets. Regenerative ag is something that we're seeing governments, companies, industry organizations, and various nonprofits are looking at regenerative ag as an area that could really drive a lot of these targets to achievement. And so that's where there's a lot of practice change that could be involved. And with that, changes to machinery and equipment that would be needed. So we'll dive in on that one first. Then we'll look at some of the various emerging technology that we're currently seeing that's in development as it relates to on-farm data analytics, optimizing processes at the farm level, and increasing efficiency. And then we'll dive in on carbon markets, what's going on. It's always a crazy area and a continuously evolving area. And there's some considerations there in terms of how you all can best support your customers. So diving in on regenerative, this word, like sustainability, can have many meanings. There are some key principles that stand out when we use the term regenerative. But in terms of what that looks like on an individual farm, it can be very, very different. The 5 core principles are minimizing soil disturbance, maximizing crop diversity, keeping the soil covered, really preventing erosion, maintaining a living root year-round, and also the opportunity to integrate livestock. All of these various principles are aimed at the 3 key outcomes we see here on the right. First and foremost, improving soil health. Secondly, looking at ways to support biodiversity at the grower level, as well as promoting economic resilience within farming communities. So there's lots of financial implications related to regenerative ag when we're looking at, decreased cost of inputs from that increased soil health. Biodiversity is a key risk management tool to make sure that a given grower's portfolio will be protected against any kind of disease or pest pressure that it might be seeing. And then overarchingly using this as a tool to drive that financial stability and resilience for farmers. So there's been a lot of research, a lot of innovation in this space, and a lot of the big companies that we were previously looking at are really interested in investing further in regenerative agriculture. So there is a lot of supply chain cooperation that's going on in this space. Walmart in particular has committed to supporting improved ecological outcomes and farmer livelihoods across 30 million acres, just looking at the Midwest alone. Of those, it is interested in measuring regenerative outcomes across 1 million of those acres. So not only looking at that practice implementation, but also what are those practices producing. PepsiCo is also supporting regenerative farming practices. They're looking at implementing those across about 7 million acres, which consists of most of its agricultural footprint when we think about Lay's and Quakers and the different companies that fall under PepsiCo. And General Mills has also focused on regenerative ag practice implementation across 1 million acres of farmland here in the next 7 or 8 years. This is just a handful. I will say there's a lot of large food companies as well as retailers that are committing to supporting regenerative ag. Again, because that purchased goods and services area, the ag impact within their supply chain is where they're really seeing the most opportunity. So in terms of equipment for regenerative ag, this is an area that's constantly evolving as well as new innovations continue to be discovered and created. A few mentioned here, the no-till drill. Using a no-till drill, regenerative farmers can plant traditional crops like grains or cover crops without the use of any tilling. We have the front mount mulcher, which can chop in front of a tractor so that the tires don't press biomass down where into the furrow where that grower might want to plant. The post-hole digger, a lot of farmers are using this when they have orchards that they're also running livestock in between, so that they can get that kind of nutrient exchange benefit with that livestock. Planting those seedlings can be time consuming, so being able to invest in a post-hole digger could be a worthwhile investment for them and really streamline that planting process. The inter-row cover crop seeder can plant cover crop seeds between rows of various cash crops, and it can be a supplemental tool to no-till practices. And lastly, the roll crimper, which has gained popularity both in organic and conventional farming because it creates the benefit of mulch. So it provides better weed control, it keeps the soil cool, improves moisture retention, and protects the soil from erosion. So all areas that a regenerative ag system might be interested in promoting.
It's kind of interesting though, the last those pieces of equipment that you just showed, Lisa, I don't think of those as ones that are like emerging technology, but that clearly that's what's coming next. Is there's all kinds of equipment that these guys are adding on to their equipment, or the manufacturer is supplying with the equipment now that will serve really what the next needs are of the industry. So what are some of those emerging technologies, more so than a post-hole digger?
I was going to say that one's probably not new. Well, I will say with the money that's being funneled down to the grower level, there are a lot of pilot projects going on to understand really what technology can be used and how accurate it can be in measuring some of these soil outcomes. So we're seeing actually the measurement of carbon starting to happen as opposed to just calculating carbon based off of various equations and assumptions. We're seeing more actual farm level management, which is pretty interesting. But a lot of these pilot projects are really aimed at figuring out what equipment, what technology is going to be most effective when we look at wide scale implementation of these types of practices. All right, so moving into emerging technology, some of these are going to be, very current and widely adopted. Others are going to be more emerging technology. So we're going to look at precision ag, which we all hear discussed very often, robotics and automation, and some of the advancements we're seeing there, as well as the focus on renewable energy. So AEM has stated that we are in the era of precision ag, and the precision ag is really providing farmers with an opportunity to increase efficiency, reduce operating costs, and decrease environmental impacts. And that's really a significant focus from the sustainability perspective, which is integrating these financial decisions with those environmental impacts. Some of the various examples of precision ag technologies include auto guidance, so auto steer, which of course is utilizing GPS signals to automatically control the tractor, machine section control, which turns a planter, fertilizer, sprayer, turns those sections on and off in rows that have been previously treated, or at a headland turns, point rows, waterways, all of which help to optimize the placement of seed or fertilizer or crop protection products. Lots of conversations around variable rates, so using sensors or pre-programmed maps to determine the application rates for seed and fertilizer and crop protection products. We see various technologies supporting this, including variable rate controllers, GPS, yield monitors, crop sensors, soil sensors, a variety of different technology there. And fleet analytics or telematics, which is real-time monitoring of equipment, including GPS location, route suggestions, and idling. So any telematics equipped equipment can really be used and monitored whenever it's in operation, which really does create that opportunity to increase asset utilization as well as reduce fuel use. So a lot of these, again, there's that financial benefit as well as that environmental benefit as well. John Deere has its See and Spray technology, which uses a combination of computer vision and machine learning So focusing on some of those AI innovations to really target weeds in season for corn, soybean, and cotton. Using this type of technology has that financial benefit, input savings from reducing non-residual herbicide use, by improving yields, by reducing crop stress, and being able to provide an effective weed kill strategy, but also keeping the sprayer between the rows and off of the crop to reduce any crop damage, as well as cost efficiency. So being able to both target spray and traditional broadcast at the same time, reducing passes and really creating that efficiency there and decreasing costs. So a lot of these various technologies do have multiple benefits at the grower level in terms of that operational perspective, as well as some of those environmental attributes that their customers or down the line consumers may be interested in. AEM partnered with the American Soybean Association, CropLife America, and the National Corn Growers Association. And they released a study that quantified how widely available precision ag technology improves environmental stewardship while also providing an economic return for farmers. So you'll see in this data, they found increased productivity by about 4%, improved fertilizer placement efficiency by about 7%, and decreased fossil fuel use by about 6%. They also noted in that study that as we see broader adoption of precision ag, they expect to see that continued increase in productivity, efficiency, and decrease in fossil fuel use by about 1 or 2-fold. So moving into robotics and automation, John Deere has invested a lot in their research and development of what they call the future of farming, which is a huge line of various autonomous drone sprayers, electric tractors like the one shown here, semi-autonomous tractors, and autonomous sprayers. We also see AGCO as another example, has actually partnered with Apex AI, which is an emerging leader in safety certified software for driverless vehicles. And they have announced advancements made through various software developments in some of their concept vehicles. We have one here on the screen. This is an autonomous farming robot, and it produces 0 emissions. It's run off of electricity and has precision planting components that enable it to plant seeds 24 hours a day. So really, again, looking at the efficiency, the profitability, and again, the greenhouse gas reductions that can then be communicated throughout the supply chain. Another example is KCoe. So KCoe has been heavily involved in automation advancements. From their customer-driven product design research, they found that current and future technology really should be falling into 5 categories of automation as they relate to agricultural field applications. The first is guidance, so providing farming operation efficiencies while an operator is still running the vehicle. So technologies that are available to help maintain row-to-row vehicle accuracy in the field while reducing overlaps and skips. The second, coordination and optimization. So the vehicle and environmental data are collected and then used together to enable field-wide communication between manned equipment. KCoe has a technology that allows the implements to control tractor functions like ground speed and rear PTO for increased performance and throughput. These coordination and optimization technologies can help organize satellite imagery as well as soil sampling maps into one single program that can be accessible from any compatible KCoe vehicles. Operator-assisted autonomy, so allowing operators to focus on the planter or implement behind them as the vehicle drives itself. Supervised autonomy, so providing in-field supervision, so the grower has that supervision level over these unmanned vehicles. that are designated to perform certain tasks. This can really help to increase productivity, efficiency by allowing producers to monitor those vehicles while also accomplishing other tasks. And then we see full autonomy. So vehicles that can be operated with remote supervision, even from the farm office or through artificial intelligence. These vehicles can account for variables such as weather, moisture levels, again, focusing on that increased productivity and efficiency. And the last area here, renewable energy. This is a huge focus, especially with the passing of the IRA, lots of new funding for renewable energy infrastructure. New Holland has been recognized as a clean energy leader. Way back in 2006, it was the first in the industry to offer 100% biodiesel compatibility, and that was followed by an introduction of a hydrogen-powered concept tractor, again, way back in 2009. More recently, they are working on launching one of the world's first production methane tractors. And their goal is really being able to provide equipment that supports these alternative fuel solutions so that farmers can power their tractors with renewable fuel that they've produced even on their own farms. So allowing that flexibility and that innovation to exist. In May of 2022, Farm Equipment released an article that highlighted the focus on electric vehicles within the ag industry. And they reported that over the last 5 years or so, there's been a pretty sharp rise in OEM interest in electric vehicle technology, in particular trying to address the tightening environmental standards and the consumer demand that we're seeing for more sustainable on-farm production practices. In 2021, there's a British market research firm called IDTechX, and that group predicted that the market for EVs in agriculture, construction, and mining could grow to up to $100 billion annually, which is a significant jump from where the market currently sits. Part of this is due to increasing regulatory pressure. So we'll talk a little bit about that, the efficiency of electricity and just kind of the financials that exist around using that as the energy source, as well as labor shortage impacts. When we hear about regulatory pressure, particularly in regards to any kind of emissions reductions, we're often hearing from Europe and California, so that's the case on this. I'll focus on California since that's a bit more direct of a market. The California Air Resource Board recently approved a two-phase Tier 5 stiffened emission standard that covers small off-road engines, and that is set to begin in 2024. Back in December of last year, they announced that the first phase of that plan is going to seek between a 40 to 90% reduction in emissions based off of energy size, and that they also seek zero emissions from all covered power equipment by 2028 in that second phase. So that's pretty significant in terms of where the market currently is and where this regulation will really push it to be. That can really drive some changes in terms of kind of what the manufacturers are focusing on, where farmers are going to be needing to shift to really be able to adopt this new technology to meet this legislation. The electricity efficiency that we see with that shift, the U.S. Department of Energy has actually cited that premium electric motors are capable of over 90% efficiency in converting the input power to output power. In comparison, if we're looking at like a diesel engine, that's usually falling between a 35 to 45% efficiency in converting the chemical energy into fuel to that power output. So electricity seems to have a significantly higher efficiency there. Farms may be able to save money with this transition between 55 and 75%. Is what was proposed by the study on fuel costs by going to electric. So being able to reduce the cost of the fuel itself, as well as being able to create additional savings by supplying that stored power to irrigation pumps or even supplying that power back to the grid. The last area, labor shortage. We're all hearing, of course, about the continued labor shortage. Of course, in the ag industry, there have been significant impacts. So this trend towards autonomous electric farm vehicles really can have a benefit from the labor perspective of freeing up current employees to do other tasks. If a remote controlled vehicle can be managed by someone outside of the area, say at like the farm location, and be able to control multiple tractors by one person, again, reducing that demand for labor. Hydrogen-powered vehicles is not something we have been focusing on too much, but is somewhere that Kubota is really looking to focus in the future. And they plan to debut the world's first hydrogen-powered fuel cell tractor by 2025. And in the process of that development, they plan to have a working hydrogen fuel cell prototype as early as 2023. So again, another way the industry is innovating to be able to provide more renewable opportunities. So I know that was a lot. I'll pause before we jump into carbon markets. Mark, what are your thoughts?
You know, anytime I hear 0% emission standards by any certain date that's anywhere in the near future, I get pretty nervous about the ability to put enough tractors on the lot or enough combines on the lot to even be sold. And that's what the current standards. And so if we're going to change all these standards and produce all this new equipment, it feels like maybe the government's a little bit behind on what the supply chain issue actually is for these dealers. But I'm sure that at some point it will catch up to what everybody's heading for. It seems like what we spend most of our time talking about recently, though, with these kind of things is in the carbon market space. And I know some of our dealers have even been contacted about, you know, what can we do about selling carbon credits and that kind of thing. So walk us through your thoughts on where we're headed in the carbon space.
Sure. So the carbon markets continue to be what we like to call the Wild West. There are a lot of market players. We continue to see more markets being set up. This slide shows a handful of some of those ag-specific players that are interested in developing carbon credits with some of the practice changes that could take place within the industry. So it's not surprising there's lots of talk and lots of confusion when carbon markets come up in conversation, and there are some significant considerations that producers should have when they're looking into entering a carbon market. Happy to answer any questions anyone has on that. But what we did want to focus on is some of the data reporting and measurement that needs to take place to be able to participate in these carbon markets. We like to call it MMRV, measurement, monitoring, reporting, and verification. So for growers to be able to participate in these types of markets, typically they need to have some kind of MMRV structure. So making sure that that on-farm data that's being collected is being measured in an accurate way, in a consistent way, that the practices that are in place are being monitored, whether that's by project verifiers, remotely or in person, making sure that those practices are in place that are going to really drive those environmental outcomes. Having consistent reporting is key. So being able to report key stewardship outcomes or the carbon scores to grain buyers, landowners, financial institutions. The reporting element needs to be consistent for these carbon markets, as well as verifiable. So a lot of the pushback we've seen historically in the credibility of carbon markets is making sure to have this verification that practices are in place, data is correct, and really providing proof to those that are purchasing the credits that what they're purchasing is coming from a strong carbon project. So how are equipment manufacturers responding to these needs? We are seeing a lot of farmers seeking confirmation at the dealership that they are purchasing equipment that is compatible with various markets that they're interested in joining. John Deere was an early mover here. They integrated with Indigo, one of the carbon markets, to make sure that they were offering the capability for growers to send on that carbon data in a credible way to be able to enter the market through Indigo and get paid for those carbon-related practices. So we're going to continue to see more and more partnerships. This is just one example. But really, the goal is to make sure the data is being passed on in a credible way with as least amount of work as possible at the grower level. So the more automation, the more partnerships, the more kind of streamlined passing of information that can be integrated in with the machinery and technology that they're using, this more streamlined and seamless carbon market participation should be. I'm sure you all are hearing a lot of questions from farmers as it relates to carbon market participation. Some of them could be, questions around shifting to more regenerative practices, what that would look like, what kind of equipment do you all have to be able to support that? Can a certain vehicle be powered by renewable energy, or what kind of electric vehicles exist that could be utilized? So really focusing on that fuel use or the energy use component. What carbon markets has a vehicle been piloted in? What is it approved for? What partnerships exist? And then also any recommendation that you all might have in terms of what carbon market to join. And again, our firm has a lot of information on what questions to ask, how to make that decision, because there is a lot to consider.
Yeah, the a lot to consider part. That's I feel overwhelmed when this conversation comes up because if I was one of these dealers, I'd be thinking we're selling precision agriculture equipment as fast as the dealer can put it on the equipment, or as fast as the manufacturer can put it on the equipment. Our manufacturer's spending tons of money on R&D and we're putting stuff on our lots that we think is good for the customer. But when we think about sustainability as an opportunity, what else can what else can the people on this call do to take advantage of the opportunities? Because when some of the other slides we see billions of dollars heading into the industry on new equipment and those kind of things, there's certainly opportunities. What do you think these participants can do now?
Yeah, so a couple areas we wanted to highlight, one of which is assessing your inventory. So evaluating and planning for the potential increases that we're expecting in terms of demand for certain equipment types. So those are all the ones that contribute to the supply chain goals around greenhouse gas or carbon reduction. So looking at renewable energy, autonomous vehicles, where that efficiency can be gained or the reduced emissions exist. And planning for that in terms of what equipment you're supplying, ensuring that equipment capabilities align with key carbon market opportunities and requirements, again, based off of that demand. So looking at ways that your inventory can really support measurement, monitoring, reporting, and verification. Another area is engaging with suppliers. So by monitoring that farmer demand and interest areas around regenerative or renewable fuel equipment, particularly related to anything practice change based, where there might be a shift in the needs at the farmer level, engaging with suppliers and communicating that where different equipment might be used. Sharing feedback with suppliers on those wants, needs, and requirements that you all are hearing. And again, staying up to date on emerging technology offerings. Today, we showed a mix of some stuff that has been around, some stuff that's newer. We continue to anticipate that the technology innovations are going to accelerate at an increasing rate. So being able to stay up to date on what those emerging technologies are, what can really benefit your customers, and communicating really with suppliers and customers on that front. And the last section, tracking market development. So again, monitoring ongoing carbon market development. There's a lot that's changing in this field. Not much regulation at the moment, which can create a lot of kind of confusion and questions. So continuing to watch where those carbon markets are going and their MMRV requirements. Tracking alignment with your inventory in terms of what those markets need and what you all have in stock. And again, being aware of increased regulation coming out of California or maybe somewhere new. We're kind of continuing to see a big focus on emissions. So being aware of those and any kind of trends towards electrification, autonomy, and robotics. So with that, I know that's a lot of information. We are happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Kim, I can't tell if any questions have come in yet. I always, when I'm the presenter, I'm always a little concerned about if there's a bunch of questions that are going to come in. Am I going to be qualified to answer them? But I know Lisa is. If anybody does have questions out there, I know I personally sometimes, like with this particular topic, I feel unqualified to even ask the question because the market is, the topic is so broad and it's so new and it's coming at us. But we certainly would love to answer any questions if they're out there.
Yes. So far, we haven't had any come through, but like Mark said, feel free to submit any. From the regulatory standpoint of all of this, so there's some of it is on a national scale or even global scale. At the state level, like we know California is doing all this stuff. You hear about California a lot. Are there other states that seem to have as strong of a push in that regard?
So California really led the way in the U.S. for its low carbon fuel standard program, which Oregon and Washington have modeled after. And so the recent developments that we've seen are under CARB's purview, the California Air Resources Board, who manages the LCFS. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see similar legislation coming out from some of those other states that have strong low carbon fuel standard programs. There are other programs being developed in a handful of other states as well that I can't recall off the top of my head. So I would say we'll continue to see low carbon fuel standards be set up. As far as the pretty dramatic legislation that we've seen coming out of California here in the last year or so, I'm not sure what other states might be considering that at this point. But as Mark had mentioned, there has been a significant amount of concern around how those regulations will be met given kind of current infrastructure.
Okay. We did have another question come in along these same lines about where we're seeing regulations. Can you speak to any Australian or New Zealand regulations that might be out there?
Oh, that's a hard one. I would have to research that. I know what some folks are doing in that region around sustainable ag practices and setting up programs to promote sustainable agriculture. But as far as fuel and equipment in terms of emissions, I would have to do a little homework there. So I can get back to whoever had asked that question.
Right.
I think the other thing to mention as an opportunity is there was a lot of stuff in the recent. Lisa had mentioned the IRA or the Inflation Reduction Act. I kind of accidentally keep calling it the Inflation Retention Act, but that's the cynical me. But there was a lot of credits that were either renewed or updated or initiated through that legislation about some sustainable type credits. So the good news on that is, as frustrating as it might be for some of you as taxpayers, as sellers of equipment, there is going to be more and more credits, I think, that we'll see out there to drive the consumer into purchasing equipment that lends itself to these kind of practices. So that is an opportunity out there. So I think it's important for people on this call to maybe look at some of those credits that are out there and available and use those as a selling point to their customer base to say, hey, this is why this equipment is a little more expensive now, but net after tax credits and things like that, it's an opportunity for you to buy something here and produce more cash flow in your business. So.
All right. It looks like that is it for questions, I think. Give everyone one last chance to send something in. All right. Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lisa, for the presentation. It was very informative and gave us, I think, all a lot to think about. And then thank you to everyone who joined us today. Like I mentioned earlier, we did record the webinar. So if you want to share it with anyone else on your team, go back and watch it yourself. It'll be available on the Farm Equipment website shortly to do so. And then just another thank you. And on behalf of Mark, Lisa, the entire Pinion team, our entire team, we appreciate you guys joining us. Please reach out and let us know if there's any topics you want us to cover in the future, and enjoy the rest of your day.